In video 3.2, we looked at an overview of a distributed application and the different components of a distributed application. In this video, we're going to look at how to create distributed applications. To create a distributed application diagram, you have to use the Create Distributed Application task that's available from the Distributed Applications node in the authoring pane. So in this video, I'm going to just talk about the different options you have to create a distributed application, and then we'll do a demo of where you'll see how to create a basic distributed application. When you open up the Distributed Application Designer, this is where you'll provide a name for the distributed application diagram that you're going to create. You can also give it a description, and there are various components that are included depending upon the template that you'll use. After you select the template, you'll save it in an unsealed management pack. So, and then that opens up the designer to a canvas where you can go in and modify any of the existing component groups or add additional component groups. If the template that you choose doesn't have all of the component groups that you need, you can actually go in and select or create new component group dialog box that opens up different component groups like the Windows Server operating system that you can choose from. Now, of all the different options you'll have in the components, you have objects such as administrative items, I should say, collections, configuration items, extensions, base class, extensions, type class, network device pending, network discovery server, Unix, Linux supported agents. For most of the scenarios, the object type that you want to include in that component group will be located in a subgroup called logical entity, which is located within the configuration items section. And pretty much from there, you can get everything from operating system, network adapter, perspective, services, and computer roles. After you have added all of your different components, then you'll need to create a relationship between the component groups to show what their dependencies are. And whenever you show their dependencies, displays each component's dependency in a diagram view. And to create a relationship between the two components, basically you'll click the Create Relationship button on the toolbar and then drag that arrow from the first component to the second component that you're going to create a relationship, such as I will create a relationship from the web application that uses the database that's hosted on the server that's running SQL. I can also create two component groups, one named my website and the other the website database, and then I can show a relationship from the website to the website database component. Lastly, after you have saved the distributed application diagram by clicking the Save button, you can go in and configure the health rollup of each one of those component groups. Now, this is going to determine the health state of the component group and the overall distributed application diagram based on three possible health rollup algorithms. The best case health state, the worst health state of any member, and the worst state of a percentage of members that are in a good health state. So when you use the health state rollup of a web server farm component group that uses the best health state of any member, if any web server in that component group is healthy, the component group is healthy. If you use the worst state health of any member, that means if any web server in that component group is unhealthy, then the component group will show unhealthy. And lastly, you can just do a percentage like 50%. So 50% of the servers that are in that web farm have to be either in a good health state or worse health state before an alert is fired. Now, in this demonstration, you will learn how to create a distributed application. If I open up the Ops Manager console and click on the authoring workspace, underneath the management pack templates, you'll see distributed application. So if I click the distributed application, from the task, I can click create a new distributed application, or I can even edit an existing distributed application. So I'm going to select create a new distributed application. This opens up the Distributed Application Designer. This is where you can give your distributed application a name, a description. You can select the template that you're going to use, either a .NET 3-tier application, line of business web app, messaging, or a blank template, and save that distributed application in a management pack. So I have chosen to call my distributed application Stock Trader, giving it a description of a distributed application for the Stock Trader web app. I'm using the line of business web application template that has the website and database component, and I'm going to save it in my Stock Trader management pack. From here, I'll click OK. Once I click OK, this opens up my distributed application designer, and this is where I can come in and add different components and objects, create my relationships, and then finally configure what my rollups are going to be, my health rollups. Now, if I click on my database, because I see the components that I have now, I have the database object, the distributed application component, services, and websites. If I click the database, this is going to give me a list of all of my databases that were discovered. If I scroll down to the Stock Trader database, the best thing to know, because I can do a drag and drop to the console, but if I don't know exactly the component group that it goes into, I can right mouse click the object and then click Add To, and only the list of available component groups will be there for me to actually add this database to. So I couldn't add the database to the web application website. I would just add it to the Stock Trader web application databases. So Stock Trader just takes the name of what I named the distributed application. So I'll just add the Stock Trader database to the Stock Trader web application database component. And if I click website, this is on I'll take the default website of my Ops Server 1 because that's where I have Stock Trader installed, and IIS is running on that server. So I'll right mouse click Ops Server 1 and add to the Stock Trader web application website. Next, I want to add my Windows Server 2012 R2 operating system component group. So I would select Add Component. I'll give the component a name, and then I'll select the object from the following types. So I'll name this component group Windows Server 2012 R2 operating system. Now I do not want all the objects. I only want this object from the following type. And the majority of your selection will come from the configuration item, logical entity objects. And from here, I'll just scroll down to operating system, my Windows operating system, the Windows Server operating system, and then you'll find your Windows Server operating system. Now I can drill all the way down to Windows Server 2012 R2, or I can just say Windows Server operating system. So I'll select the Windows Server R2 operating system and click OK. And then all of my Windows Server R2 servers will display in my particular object picker. And I would select the server that's hosting the actual web application. Right mouse click that server and add it to the Windows Server 2012 R2 operating system component group. I'm going to add two more components. I'm going to add my IIS server role component and my SQL server role component. So I'm going to select Add Components and just give the component a name. I'll call this one my IIS server role component group. From my logical entity, I'll come down to computer role, Windows computer role, and I'll select IIS server. And from the IIS server role, I'll select the server that's hosting IIS for this particular website. Add to the IIS server role. And then lastly, I'm going to add another component for SQL. Select my object type, logical entity, computer role, Windows computer, SQL role. And there's my SQL database. And I'll just right mouse click the SQL database and add it to the SQL role. Next, it's time to configure my relationships. So I'll click Create Relationship, and I'll create a relationship between the web application website and the IIS server role. I'll also create a relationship from the IIS server role down to my Windows 2012 operating system. And lastly, I'll drag the SQL server role to the Windows 2012 operating system. And I will drag the stock traded web application database to my SQL server role. Now this kind of looks confusing, so I can just click Relayout, and it actually creates my layout of my diagram. And from here I can click Save. That will save all the changes, and then once all those changes have been saved, then that's when I can go in and configure the health rollup on any of these particular objects. So I can come back and collapse each of my component groups, and the reason I'm collapsing the component groups the reason is because that's where I can actually go back and configure the health rollup. So on the Windows Server 2012 operating system, I can click the health rollup for availability, and that will allow me to come into the properties and then configure they default to worst case of any member, but I can go in and create an override for either the best health state of any member or configure the worst state of a percentage of any member, and then I can put that member in there. Basically, worst health state means that if any of the servers or components that are in that component group are unhealthy or unavailable, then that will actually roll up to an alert. And once you're done, you can just save that distributed application designer, and you will have created your own distributed application. This concludes our demonstration on creating a distributed application. In our next video, we'll look at the different management pack templates that are available in the authoring pane.